Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ahmed, for the very kind introduction. I'm delighted to participate in this event this afternoon, and I thank SERB, Professor Sandeep Verma, and Dr. Monica Agarwal for the invitation, and to Professor Arun Kumar and his team for the very fine hospitality. Let me get started. This is for Professor Pant, just to show that I do have a boarding pass to go to Mars sometime in the next mission in a few years' time. All right, jokes apart, I would like to speak on how to select a research problem for funding from national agencies. This is the title given by Monica, but I will actually not address this question. I would rather provide some guidelines on what not to select as a research problem. I also realize that I stand between you and a nice afternoon nap after the 5-star sumptuous lunch. So I will provide a bit of entertainment so that you can keep your eyes open. It's also very important figuratively to keep your eyes open when you are doing serious research. All right, why do research? So a simple answer to that is generate new and possibly previously unknown knowledge. Now, research is not a routine 9-to-5 job. This is something that I think all young people should realize. It requires creative and innovative ideas. And in the next slide, I will try to make a distinction between these two words: hardworking individual, willing to take risks, and last but not the least, you have to enjoy the work. Even if the first 3 conditions are met, but you don't enjoy the work, then you should probably be doing research. In a sense, when you look at these 4 sort of rough outlines or boundary conditions, you also realize that in order to be a good businessman, you need to have all these qualities. Okay, so doing good research, outstanding research, is not very different from running an excellent business in some sense. I have taken a few definitions from a website given below about the difference between creativity and innovativeness. I don't agree with all of them, but here are some definitions. I will not read them out. I have highlighted 2 of the most important ones, particularly in terms of creativity, is related to the generation of ideas which are new and unique. There seems to be some echo here, but is it okay for you? Okay. All right. And innovation is related to introduce something better into the market. I think the market introduction is not always true. You can always have an innovative idea as well. So we will not make a big fuss about these strict definitions. I would also like to highlight to you that it is very important to be able to ask questions when you try to identify a research problem. I often joke to young people, young students in particular, that our education system only trains you to find 3 wrong answers from a multiple choice question. And you never, really learn what to ask questions. And just to highlight this point, this is really something I use for high school kids. I would like to show you this gentleman who said that his mother never asked the standard question that we all ask to our children when they come back from school, that what did you study? He said, not my mother. My mother would ask, did you ask a good question? And then he goes on to say that difference, asking good question, made him become a scientist. And let me reveal his identity. He is I.I. Rabi, who discovered nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR, and most of you are familiar with the MRI imaging, which uses this technique. All right, I would also like to highlight this point with 2 more statements, one by Richard Zehr. He's a professor of chemistry in Stanford University and a good friend of the chemistry community in this country. He says the quest to answer a question is where the learning takes place, not in the answer itself. I will also play a short video from my advisor's interview with the American Chemical Society. Let's see if it plays okay.
I decide what to work on, not so much on the basis of what I already know how to do, but what I find a really interesting question. You know, there's a really brilliant essay by Dick Zare in the most recent issue of Chemical and Engineering News, where he says the most exciting creative thing you can do is ask the right questions. Getting the answers is easy. Figuring out what to ask is the hard part. And I thought that's really very insightful. But I think that's fundamentally it for me. I really just try to think of what it is that we don't really know how to do, where I would find it very gratifying to answer it. One of the pieces of advice I do give to young people starting out, my people who go into research, that kind of thing, is try to work on a problem where if it turned out as well as you hope, you would be proud to publish it. If people would look at it and say, oh, that's just more of the same, then you really shouldn't be doing it, you know?
In case you miss the point, I have a transcript of one of the statements. He says, try to work on a problem where if it turned out to be as well as you hope, you would be proud to publish it. If people look at it and say that, oh, it's just more of the same thing, then you shouldn't really be doing it. I think when identifying a research problem, these sort of statements are very important. I'll give you a sample question. Are you all awake? All right. What question do you think you can ask from this picture? Young people only. Why did the chicken cross the road? That will not be a good research problem. Okay, jokes apart. I believe that there are two fundamental ways of doing research. And today I will be somewhat science neutral or STEM neutral. My presentations are largely devoid of any science or chemistry, science in general and chemistry in particular. I believe that there are two ways of approaching a problem or focusing on a research proposal. One is to identify a problem, an existing problem, an important one, good question, and find ways of attacking the problem or solving the problem as indicated by the arrows. And each of these arrows would originate from ideas. And I will elaborate on ideas a little bit later. As opposed to a problem-solving approach, you can also have what I will call a curiosity-driven research. This is also mentioned by Monica in a different way, called blue sky research, where you don't know where your research will lead to, but you have a question, you have a curiosity type question, sometimes a childlike question, and you find different ways of answering it, again indicated by the arrows. And some of these findings may actually end up developing into a real research problem. In fact, this is something that has happened in my research career, but I will not go into those details today. So let's say a few things about ideas. So typically what happens from an idea to its execution, that is idea till the end of an innovation, is that you start with the idea, write a proposal, give it for funding, submit it for funding. If you get funded, then it goes to the execution. But as money is less and applications are more, sometimes you have to go back and evolve your ideas further so that you have the better proposal, which is reviewed in a more positive way. So sometimes this cycle goes on and on for several rounds, and eventually, if the project gets funded, you execute the project, generate new knowledge. This is something that I mentioned earlier, that you start with an idea and generate new knowledge. This is part of what I would call a creative or an innovative project. And then the new knowledge gets translated into papers, patents, products, if it is more of an applied research, PhD students, and so on and so forth. So key to this is the development of an idea that leads to a proposal. So the idea, as I mentioned earlier, should be an original idea, and it should be a creative idea based on creative thoughts. I would like to play another short video clip again. This is from a chemist. Most of the chemists know who he is. His name is Linus Pauling, one of the most prolific chemists of the 20th century, and he's the only one. He's the only one who got 2 unshared Nobel Prizes, one in chemistry, one in peace. I have a long video clip of his work, but I will quickly go to the portion I would like to highlight today. And this is where he speaks about ideas. Let me open the file, get it started, and I will go to about 6 minutes and 30 seconds.
Of the molecular benefits of large quantities of vitamin C. In 1987, Pauling modestly summed up the secret of his astonishing career.
You aren't going to have good ideas unless you have lots of ideas and some sort of principle of selection.
A biographer wrote, Pauling's audacity was coupled with deep chemical intuition, and his overall ability to identify sound ideas and reject unsound ones was remarkable.
Okay, I'll stop at that. In case, again, you have not followed the audio, this is basically what it says, that you aren't going to have ideas unless you have lots of ideas and a principle of selection to choose from. And then he also said, as was mentioned by the other narrator, that his ability to identify sound ideas and reject unsound ones was remarkable. So this is again a message to the younger people who are trying to develop an idea into a proposal, that you always should have a basket of ideas and analyze each of them, spend time on each of them, and find out which one will stand the test of time. The unsound ones should really be rejected at an early stage, because if you keep trying to make an unsound project or idea into a proposal, it will never end with proper ideas. So in terms of ideas, this is again a few excuse me, a few statements that I have taken from a Chinese, rather Taiwanese biologist, and he says that to take an idea forward, what you need to do is to pick your favorite one and ask questions. Again, something that I mentioned earlier. Write all interesting unanswered questions related to the project. Then write out all untested hypotheses related to the project. And I think this is a very useful exercise. And after that, write all possible experiments to test the hypothesis with no regard to money, no regard to facilities, no regard to personnel, equipment, and so on. I have colored experiment differently just to indicate that this is not necessarily true for experimental projects, because even for theoretical projects or even for humanities projects, experiments can be replaced by data analysis or by survey. Both will imply the same sort of analysis of how you can test your hypothesis, because after all, the point number 3 is basically a way to test your hypothesis. For experimental projects, it's through experiments. And at the end of it, you should be convinced, because ultimately you will have to convince the reviewers and the funding agency. So unless you are convinced, it will again not move very far. And sometimes if you're not convinced, then you have to go back to your idea and develop the idea into better ones. And typically this is again something taken from this website. In case this website is no longer available, you can send me a mail and I will send you whatever file I had downloaded in an earlier case. So basically, okay, so the pointer doesn't work here. You start with specific aims or the objectives, because that's basically what you are going to do. After you have analyzed the ideas, after you have developed the ideas into thoughts and wrote a proposal, basically you will have a specific objectives. And then you have to explain what you are going to do, and then the background and significance will tell you why you are going to do it. And therefore, there should be some background or significance on those specific ideas. Then preliminary work. In case the PI has already done some preliminary work, it adds value to the proposal. In case you have not done it, but somebody else has done it, it also adds value, even though it's not your work. But if there is a gap in what others have done and what you have proposed, then it is typically a fundable one. And finally, of course, the methodology. But regardless of how you develop your proposal, the proposal should look professionally made, seriousness, and it should be sympathetic to reviewers. Because many times what happens is the proposals appear to be written for the PI. Okay? for the reviewers, it becomes extremely difficult to figure out what the proposal is all about. It should be communicative and educating. It should be persuasive. There should be powerful arguments. And the entire proposal should tell a significant and a good scientific story. So these are the expectations. Well organized, clearly written for reviewers. There should be powerful arguments. Significance should be the top priority, and there should be an exit route. Suppose whatever you have proposed doesn't work. So you have to have a plan B built into your proposal, which will tell you that how you can get out of a problem in case you face it. Okay? It's always good to have a risk analysis done at the writing of the proposal stage, because if it happens in the execution of the proposal, suppose it's a 3-year project, and you find some serious problems in the first year, then there will be essentially a dead end, and the proposal will not move forward. So it is best to do the risk analysis at an early stage and have a plan B built into the proposal, particularly if it is a very challenging or a novel project. But in reality, many of the proposals that reviewers get, they're not focused, they're confusing, they're written for the PI. Instead of arguments, there are statements. Instead of significance, there is the statement that give me money. And there is no exit route, and that I have stated in this following way, that all the eggs are in the same basket. You drop it and your project dies there. Let me also tell you a few things about, about proposals which this gentleman has said. Do any of you know who I'm talking about? There are some biologists here. You will all recognize this picture. There's Watson and Crick, who discovered the DNA double helix sometime in the early 50s. So this is James Watson on the left, and on the left in this picture as well. So James Watson has some nice statements. You can search for Watson statements on the website, and I will just quote a few of them, again for entertaining and so that you don't fall asleep. All right? He says, to have success in science, you need some luck. But to succeed in science, you need a lot more than luck. And it's not enough to be smart. He goes on to say there are a lot of smart people around, but they're not doing anything. So he says that in my view, you have to combine intelligence with a willingness not to follow conventions when they block your path forward. And this is where I think we face a problem with many of the submitted proposals, that they all appear, many of them, I'm not saying all, many of them appear to be very routine, and all are very, very safe. And that doesn't take us anywhere, because unless you are willing to take risk. I often again joke that Indians take risk only when driving on the roads, not when writing a proposal, which is actually true. So he also goes on to say that never do anything that bores you. That's why I said that you must enjoy your research. It should not be looked like a 9-to-5 job. I have to finish my last experiment by 4:30 and then go to the bus stop or hop onto the taxi. To make a huge success, he also says that a scientist has to be prepared to get into deep trouble. I have modified this one because that was a slightly offensive word. Essentially that means that you have to take risk. So my final rule, if you cannot stand to be with your real peers, I have removed some of the statements, so there is no connection between some of the statements. And basically it says that, you also need to be with your peers. You cannot simply stay in your own small laboratory and expect to do very well. You need to be in the community. This particular slide I have taken from Professor Vishal Rai, because he and I participated in a similar online event, I think, during the first lockdown in 2020. So I will not elaborate very much on this because Dr. Madhu Dixit will speak about the details of writing a proposal tomorrow. It's also an advertisement for her talk. And linking her talk with this one, that it's basically proposal should have what, why, and how. And I will briefly touch upon these points a little bit later. It basically starts with innovative ideation. Again, he also says that no substitute for good idea. Defines the research question well, good, accurate, yet brief title. I will show you a not so brief and not so acceptable title a little bit later. Articulate the objectives clearly. So that defines the what part of the proposal. Then why is basically you have to define the importance and significance and place it in the context of state of the art in the field. And this again, SERB has page limits, international and national status, and that should be done in a concise way so that the reviewers will find it easy to identify papers. If you list 100 papers there, it's of no use. And the how basically describes how you are going to solve the problem in an unambiguous manner. And as I said, it should provide proof of principle, anticipate challenges, and backup plans. So plan B should be built into your proposal. This is again a slide from Vishal Rai, and he says this ideation, brainstorming, innovation. Here I'm using innovation in a slightly different context. Should involve some of these points. I will not go into those details, but basically this is elaborating the how aspect of the proposal. And you should also sometimes challenge the prior assumptions in case you find that some assumptions, hypotheses, some results published by others are not correct. Again, the next 6 or 7 slides may have some overlap with Dr. Madhu Dixit's presentation tomorrow, but I will nevertheless very quickly go through it. Let me just check how I think I'm doing okay with time. Look at the format and strictly follow the instructions. And this is sometimes, frequently, this is what we observe when we get the proposal. They're not done as per the format. So look at the format, because the CRG, the power, and different types of funding by SERB, they have different formats. Title, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, title should be brief but very clear. And sometimes putting in some fashionable keywords, unless it is absolutely needed, should not be put in there. And here is a title, this is something I have synthesized, but it basically lists pretty much everything under the sun. And sometimes the PIs think that, if I give a very broad objective, it will get funded. But the answer is no, because the proposal has to be very focused. So this is completely out of focus, and it lists pretty much anything and everything. As it's not going to work, it's not going to get funded. So in the summary, which is again a short, a few hundred words prescribed by each of the grants, is that what is the problem, why you want to investigate it, how you are going to investigate it, and lastly, how will this project would lead to an advancement of knowledge. Okay? So if all these answers are properly given, proposal is very likely to get funded. Objectives should neither be very many, should neither be very few in number. Typically 4 to 5 objectives are probably the right number, because all these objectives should be met within a 3-year period. This is the what part of it. This is typically for a CRG proposal. Again, I will not go into these details. And the why part is importance of the proposed project in the context of the current status. I will skip through these. The work plan is how we are going to do it. And here, I think different types of projects of SERB have different page limits. But unless the work plan is very clearly and accurately described, the PIs or the committee members will have no way to judge if what you have proposed is going to work. And that's, again, something that has to be done very, very accurately and with appropriate citation of prior work. If you are using a methodology, part of a methodology from what has already been done, but use it for some other purpose, but that should be very clearly cited. And missing a key citation, including your own, can often land you into trouble. So that is very important too. And here again, I have given a statement. Again, this is some chemistry bias, but sometimes we have also seen vague and generalized statements at the end of the methodology that the chosen molecule, somebody is making molecules, chosen molecules will be synthesized using blah, 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 and will be evaluated for their biological studies. Okay, this is an extremely vague statement, and it doesn't actually tell anybody what the PI is actually going to do. I will skip this part. I'll skip this part also. This is where many PIs make a mistake. Name of experts. Okay, one should list real experts in the field. Okay, and very frequently, friends or friendly experts are listed here, and that is also taken very, very seriously. So this is, yeah, supervisor. Supervisor, for example, cannot be an expert here. Okay. A few things about budget, but I will not go into these details because this is again something that will be discussed tomorrow by Dr. Dikshit, as I mentioned. Okay. I will give you one example. This is slightly chemistry biology bias, because we get a lot of proposals on new drug development. Okay, what most young researchers do not realize is that drug development is something that cannot be done by one individual. Just to give you some numbers, the development of a drug from scratch to the market takes 12 to 15 years and requires about $2.5 billion. 2.5 billion, that is B, not M. $2.5 billion, and requires hundreds of researchers and thousands of patients. And very often, a drug development proposal does not come with the proper homework. And the minimum homework is listed here. You have to indicate you have to write what is the indication and the market size. Because if the market size is $100 million, then it probably has no application. Because that's too small for a drug development, because that's going to cost billions of dollars. What are the approved drugs for the same indication? Is there any unmet medical need? In fact, that is very, very important. If you're trying to develop a drug and you don't justify why it is needed, then it's as good as a sort of a me too research. And that again, for a drug development which is really an applied research, is not going to take you anywhere. And additionally, even if there's an unmet need, you also have to say what is the positioning of the compound and differentiation. What is it going to do that the existing drugs do not do? Again, some of these things need to be done. And what is the competition? Who are your competitors? How well they are placed? What is their annual sales? And unless these things are done, a drug development project will not work. There is much more than this, which I also was not aware until I heard some of these details from Dr. Balganesh. But this homework, if it is not done, then any project on drug development will probably not see the light of the day. Okay, so let me, I will also try to cut some time and perhaps have more discussion. But I have a few more things to say. So let me summarize some of the points that I have highlighted. This is very important. The grant, we are talking about government projects. It comes from taxpayers' money. That includes your as well as mine. And therefore, every penny that you spend will have to be justified. So invested in a research, since the funding agencies are investing in a research program, there should be a short or a long-term benefit to the society. The grant proposal, as I mentioned, if it is very well written, but comes with a bad idea or a routine idea, it's not likely to get funded. And no matter how well you write, it's not going to get funded, because it's the idea that is very important. The other possibility is that it's an innovative idea but badly presented. That's why I said that, all those points have to be very clearly defined. And if there are issues with drafting, then if you can redraft it, make it easier to read, better to read, then perhaps you might or might not find support. But perhaps I can say that if it is an innovative idea and if it is well drafted, as many of us have seen in the past, that it will find support. And I have highlighted, and I'm sure that SERB will agree with that. If it is a really good idea, well-written proposal, gets good review from peer reviewers, then it is going to get funded. So let me conclude with a number of statements, because this basically sums up what all I have described before, that start with a good, challenging idea. The specific aims should be limited to 3 to 4. You need to be very clear on the hypothesis. That is, what is it that you are saying has not been done before, and how the hypothesis could be tested. And formulate your proposal clearly before writing it up, because I know of many friends who spend months to write and submit a proposal. Follow a SERB proposal, format correctly, suggest appropriate reviewers, and there is no limit for the budget as long as it is justified. You know, for the CRG proposal, for example, there's a budget limit, but if the proposal is good and you justify a major equipment, for example, it usually gets funded, it takes time, it goes through another committee and so on. I think some of the other ones like Power and Young Investigators Research Award, those things have limits, but that is for the early career, that is the early career funding. And ideally, whatever the outcome is, it can be publication, it can be patents, should lead to an advancement of knowledge in the field. And unless you generate new knowledge, it is again not going to get, for example, if you write a second proposal based on what you have published, unless the papers are good enough, generates new knowledge, develops into a new area, the second proposal is, there is no guarantee that the second proposal along the same area will get funded. Another point that I would like to mention to potential PIs is that if your proposal is interdisciplinary, and suppose you don't have the expertise in the other area, then you must have a co-PI with the complementary expertise. And sometimes people say, I'm going to make XYZ and for biological activities. But the proposal lacks details of who is going to do the biological studies. And in such cases, we usually go back to the PI and ask him or her to include a co-PI with the appropriate background. And the duration of the project, you know, these are not very important for today's discussion. It's typically 3 years for the CRG projects, but extension is sometimes possible. That it's not, as I said, it's not very relevant. I will also take 1 or 2 minutes to highlight a few points about how the proposal is presented once it is executed. Typically a 1.5 to 2 years, the PIs will have to make a presentation about the progress. And very frequently we find that the presentations also lack certain issues. And since I have time, I will go through a bit of this particular slide, because for the proposal presentation, you have very strict time and slide limits. And I will just highlight it. But the bottom line here is that you should follow the ABC rules. That is, your presentation should be accurate, brief, and clear. So, no need to give any introduction on what you are doing, the title of the project, progress under each objectives, so 2 slides per objective for a total of, let's say, 8 slides if you have 4 objectives, summary and conclusions, and any relevant information about what still needs to be done. One more point, and again, I would like to highlight that there will be a talk on this tomorrow, is whenever you write a proposal, now that you have figured out, you know, what to write, how to write, and so on, you must make sure that there is no plagiarism issue in the international or national, you know, literature review or anything of that kind. And Dr. Prathima Mainkar, who is in the audience, she will give a talk on many ethical aspects related to research, including plagiarism, I believe. So be there in Prathima's talk tomorrow. Finally, in fact, this may resonate with your Chief Minister's slogan, but if you're pursuing a good idea, you must keep something in mind. And this is something that I often tell my students, that if you're doing something good, then keep in mind, and I will take this opportunity to ask you a question, this statement: failure is not an option. not in the front row, those who are seated behind, do you know where this statement comes from? It's an old statement, dates back to the early 1970s. This is actually a refrigerator magnet from the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. This is for the Apollo 13 mission. Many of you have seen this movie, Apollo 13. Maybe young people do not know about it. But Apollo 13 is one of the Apollo missions which actually failed. It didn't go to the moon. There was an oxygen leak. And Houston had to find ways, very innovative ways, to bring back the 3 astronauts, which they finally did. And somebody in the Houston Control Center had made this statement, failure is not an option. And I think this is a very profound and very strong statement. And particularly when you are not able to get through some difficult times in your research career, perhaps it is important to keep this in mind. So finally, I think I have finished and saved a few minutes, precious minutes that we have lost during the morning session. I would like to wish all of you good luck and best wishes, particularly to those who plan to submit proposals. And if there are any difficulties, SERB is going to help you. The appropriate PAC members are going to help you. And if any of you need a copy of my proposal, just write to Monica and I will share a final version of this proposal as a single PDF file with Monica, and you can get it. So you don't have to write any of these things down. I have a few more supporting documents, including that Taiwanese proposal writing document, and I'll be happy to share that with all of you too. So finally, this is our institute building. I don't know how many of you have made it to Bangalore and to our institute. In case you have not, I would like to welcome all of you to our still beautiful campus, although there is a lot of construction activity, including a big hospital that is being built in the campus, the so-called Bagchi Parthasarthi Hospital. And because we are going to start some clinical research facility with an 800-bed hospital. So there is a bit of construction activity going on in our campus, but it is still quite beautiful, particularly at this time of the year after a shower. So I welcome all of you to visit Bangalore and our campus. And with this, I would like to thank again SERB for giving me an opportunity to interact with the young people. And I believe that we can have more informal discussion after my talk and perhaps during the evening interaction session. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I had a question regarding how a national grant agency is going to look at what is an important research question.
Okay, yeah. So what's your question?
When identifying a research question,
Yeah.
there can be 3 aspects that can be considered important. One is theoretical advancement, one is direct application to solving a problem, as you said, for the people, or it's just like a systematic survey. So when a national granting agency looks at a proposal, how do they distribute the importance level amongst these 3 components?
I think there is no such distribution. I think the granting agency and the committee members and the peer review folks will simply look at the quality of what you have proposed, whether it addresses an unanswered question, what is your methodology, like basically what, how, and why, what, and how. They basically give importance to progress is not good. Suppose 2 years are over, you have given 4 objectives and you have 0 publications, then obviously there is a problem. But at that time, I think the funding agencies and the committee members try to assist. Suppose you don't have the facilities to run a particular measurement, then the committee and the SERB can suggest to you how you can get some of these studies done elsewhere. Because this was difficult, let's say 20 or 25 years ago. But now many major institutions and many not so big institutions have reasonably good instrumental facilities. And therefore, getting additional measurements done, it can be worked out. So I think those who are from smaller institutions having fewer facilities should get in touch with the committee members for assistance. And I think committee members will be more than happy to provide some guidance about how to get certain measurements done. We also don't have every equipment that we need. So sometimes for us also, certain samples have to be sent elsewhere, either outside the department, sometimes outside the institute, but usually within the country. Because I think within India, we now have in the last 10 to 15 years, pretty much all the state-of-the-art equipments. And expertise, that's also important. One thing that we miss is a synchrotron, but there are ways to use synchrotron facilities elsewhere in the world. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And
I think we'll take this last
one question.
And then, that is the last.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, I wanted to know if the project got selection, and after the step is like we have to go for the screening process. So how to defend ourselves or how to go for the screening process, like chances could be like strong for the selection of the project, for the screening process.
Screening process?
Yeah. Once the project got selected.
No, if it is selected, then there is no screening.
No, it's there. They are asking for the screening, like 2 or 3 members are already selected for the same project, but they ask for the screening process. So after the screening process, they are going to finalize who is going to be like supported for that project.
Okay,
I think this is within the university or the DST? You're talking about the university system or DST? Once you are funded, you are funded.
Usually from the funding agency, this is how it happens.
Yes.
Suppose 1,000 projects are submitted for a particular program. Initially, there is a screening process, not involving the PIs, okay, where the committee and other peer reviewers take a first look at the 1,000 proposals and then screens it based on certain criteria, okay, and using that they screen and shortlist another, let's say 30% of it. Okay, so those 300 proposals are then sent to the committee members and to other peer reviewers, and finally a decision is made based on peer review of those 300. And depending upon the budget available, maybe 100 will get funded, maybe 50 will get funded. Okay. But that's the way usually it works with most of the funding agencies. I don't have a very wide expertise or experience, but I know that in SERB and DST, that's how it works. And in CSIR also pretty much the same way it works. But Monica, if you want to add anything to this. Yeah, you can, 1 second.
First we screen all the proposals, and screening proposals we send for peer review, and after getting the peer review comments we send to PAC, and PAC takes decision on the merit of the proposal.
Exactly. It used to be that in the earlier days when the numbers were less, the PIs would come and make a presentation to the committee, all the PIs whose projects are being evaluated. But nowadays this is done only in a few cases where either the peer review is not very clear, not enough peer reviews, or the area of the work is a bit different from the normal areas, or if the money asked for is a lot more. In that case, the committee would like to hear from the PI one-to-one on face-to-face basis about why a certain equipment of high value is required.
Sir, I would like to ask.
Sorry? Any specific? Oh, no. I think there is no standard format for the peer review. Well, there is actually, but within the form, because peer reviewers are supposed to answer about 6 or 8 questions on the website. This is done online. But under each of them, the peer reviewers must put in certain number of characters. I think that's how the system is right now. But it works out well.
I thank you, Professor Maitra. I think better
May I
when
have
we
the
have
last
a break, then you speak, okay? He's going to be here whole night actually.
Sir,
Tomorrow
just
he
the
will.
extension to the question of ma'am.
Yeah.
So it's like the review, why don't we get review comments back, just like the research papers, so that we can improve our research proposal? Because we always get single line that your project is not selected due to this and this.
Yeah, this is
Why don't we get the comments back so that we can work on our hard work which we have submitted?
This is a policy decision that the funding agencies need to take. I believe that in some of the biological funding agencies this is done. Am I right, Sandeep? And in chemistry, I believe it is done in a case-to-case basis if the PI asks for the comments. Am I right, Monica?